clouds hung above, threatening to unleash what would be a stormy night. Leaving my office building reminiscent of a safe lifestyle where nothing out of the ordinary happens, I hurried to my car and quickly unlocked the door. The quick flash of light from the sky did not go unnoticed, and neither did the faint sound of thunder cracking that followed. I realized that it hadn't rained in months, and that its revival was on a Halloween night of all nights. My car was not a problem to find, since it was the only one left in the entire parking lot. Everyone else had left home early, as though it was some sacred holiday. I never understood Halloween. There was no real purpose for it, really. It was just a bunch of little kids with a sugar rush, dressing up in silly costumes while their parents chased after them. I couldn't stand the obnoxious talk of my co-workers bragging about their child's brilliant costume or how they got invited to the parties for the richest families in town.
When I got to my car, I sighed. The worst part of Halloween was finally over, I thought. As I drove back home, the clouds had caught up, releasing gushes of water down my windshield, almost eliminating my sight of the street ahead. By the time I got home, darkness had completely overtaken the night sky, as the rain continued to clatter vigorously. To my surprise, there wasn't anybody outside. Although a raging storm had diffused throughout the town, I didn't expect all the children in my neighborhood to miss their favorite night of the year. I didn't take too much interest in this discovery. Being isolated from the rest of the houses on the street, I usually didn't get many trick-or-treaters anyways.
Despite the thunderous noise coming from outside, the door screeched open as I entered the house. The house was grimy and frail, so every step upon the aging wood caused a din. Once I got settled, I set up the fireplace. As the fire crackled through the living room, I walked to my enormous bookshelf that climbed the entire wall. It was filled with horror stories. I may have hated Halloween, but I could spend hours reading about the monstrous creatures and the suffering and fear of terrified characters. I had already read all the books I owned, but it didn't stop me from reading them again. If the story was truly daunting, it would never fail to send a blood-curdling feeling throughout my body or goosebumps along my arms. I scanned through the countless books, wondering which one I should read now. As I got to the last shelf, I noticed a mysterious black book hiding suspiciously. It was a shock to me that I didn't remember reading the book or even recognize it at all. Without thinking, I quickly grabbed the book, curiosity seizing me. As soon as I opened it, I knew it would be unlike any story I had ever read. As almost all my books were, it was old, tattered, and tearing apart. However, I felt a strange connection to the book, as if it were a part of me. I decided that it couldn't hurt to read the book. I sat down on my blood-red chair, with the fireplace directly in front of me. The light from the fire created enough light for me to see the words, but the room was still immersed in dim darkness where the light could not reach. The story began by describing a stormy night on Halloween. The similarity of the time and weather of the book and reality made me shiver, but I kept on going, not able to resist. It went on to talk about the character's dislike of Halloween and his interest in horror stories. At this point, I knew this was no ordinary book. Fear was starting to settle in me as if it was crawling into my very soul. Still, I kept reading. Once it mentioned an unrecognizable book in the character's bookshelf. I immediately dropped the book, banging onto the shaggy carpet. My heart was beating so hard it threatened to burst from my chest. Sweat was dripping down my forehead, making its way onto my quavering lips. I tried to convince myself that it was all inside my head, that there had to be some sort of explanation for this uncanny connection. But I knew that I had always been a rational and sensible person. I never showed signs of this kind of madness.
All reason pointed me not to read any more, to run as fast as I could away from the terror that consumed every part of me. But above getting out of that hell, there was an even stronger impulse to keep reading. With trembling hands, I picked up the book and opened to the page I had left on. It seemed like the harsh wind from the storm had caused the curtains in the nearby window to blow from side to side. At that moment, I turned around to look at my window and the silk curtains swaying with the wind from outside, just as they had done in the story. The wind mocked me with its gentle howling. A sudden realization sparked in my mind that I had never opened any window. I continued. From the stairs, a creaking and screeching noise had echoed across the entire house. Yet again, I was astonished by the harsh and clamorous sound that I heard directly from the stairs, with the exact characteristics described by the book. Nothing could coerce me to stay and finish the story any longer. I ran as quickly as I could towards the front door, breathing in ragged gasps. My lungs were crying for air, as if I had run a 1,000-mile marathon. I was only a few inches from my escape when a force stronger than gravity took a hold of me and dragged me back to the chair. A high-pitched shriek slipped from my mouth as my heart pounded uncontrollably. I tried everything to get away from the horrifying book, but I couldn't fight it any longer. The wind that had come from the window had suddenly stopped. Seconds later, he felt chills go down his spine as the atmosphere around him became frozen. Moments later, an unnatural, icy air had also engulfed me. My teeth clattered frantically, and goosebumps covered my skin. I realized that I was getting closer to the end of the book, and I feared what tragic ending could come from such a monstrous story. Whatever had created the coldness all around the house was now making its way upward. I looked up at the massive chandelier that hung on the ceiling, swinging rapidly. I wanted nothing but to run away, without ever uncovering what fate lies for the character, or me. My will could not fight the beast that controlled me as my eyes crept closer to the final pages. The hinges keeping the chandelier from falling were slowly twisting, making the chandelier move closer and closer towards him. He watched the chandelier right until there was nothing left to unscrew. He cried out as the chandelier came crashing down. I knew there was nothing left to do but accept the harsh demise of the character, that I kept struggling to get out of the chair and run away from my inevitable death. I thought about the horror stories that I relished so much, the ones where I waited impatiently for the tragedy that would leave the characters dead or traumatized for life. I had become a character of my own horror story.
That was the last thought I ever had as the chandelier, which was swinging aggressively above my head, plunged from its place on the ceiling, leaving me no time to scream.